Hey patrons, what's going on? I am so happy to bring back Mosher's Mailbag this week. We had a little bit of a hiatus because we really didn't have a few questions. I guess people were kind of shocked by what's going on with the Eagles lately. But this week we have three really good questions for Mosher's Mailbag, and so I'm excited to bring it back and get going with the great questions. All right, so the first question for Mosher's Mailbag is this, and it's kind of a funny one, but it's a good question. It comes from Chris, and he says, did the Giants want to lose that game last week to get better draft position? They were up 19-3 and giving the ball to Saquon Barkley. And then the next thing you know, it was like, where's Saquon Barkley? He's not getting the ball. The Eagles start scoring. And then all of a sudden, the Eagles win the game. And a lot of people, Chris, you're not the only one. A lot of people have said to me, were the Giants tanking? So let's think about this. First, no, I don't think that they were tanking. It's really hard to tank in football, especially. In basketball, you can do it by just putting the worst possible players out there. You saw the Sixers be able to do that. But in football, they still have guys out there who are good players. Olivier Vernon, Janoris Jenkins, Saquon Barkley is obviously a great player. Eli Manning, they've been going with. He's not a great player anymore, but they could have, if they wanted to tank, right? They could have benched Eli and brought in Kyle Lauletta or Alex Tanney or whatever. Pat Shurmur, I know him pretty well from his time here as an Eagles assistant twice, once under Andy Reid, once under Chip Kelly. I've gotten to know him fairly well, and I would say Pat is a very no-nonsense guy, and he would never tank. But by the same token, he's also a little bit from that Andy Reid stubborn tree. So you heard him after the game. He said, when asked why he didn't get the ball to Saquon Barkley more in the third quarter and why Wayne Gallman got a few carries, he said, hey, look, we have a package built in for Wayne Gallman. We can't give every single carry to Saquon Barkley. So that was kind of his excuse. Now, there were other factors that played into a part. The Giants only had 2 possessions in the third quarter, and I think only 2 in the fourth quarter. So they didn't have nearly as many possessions in the second half as they did in the first. Also, they had a bunch of penalties, a lot on first and second down, that put them into passing downs. And then you saw Eli Manning got sacked by Chris Long and sacked by Michael Bennett because the Giants cannot pass the ball. The only way they can pass the ball is by running the ball first, getting chunk yardage, and working off play action. When they have to drop back and pass like they tried to do for the first 8 or 9 games this year, they cannot protect Eli Manning. Now, all that said, that is not an excuse for 16 minutes and 35 seconds to go by between Saquon Barkley's last touch of the third quarter and first touch of the fourth quarter. That's 16 and a half minutes is more than a quarter of football. So that to me was inexplicable and inexcusable and bad coaching and stubborn coaching, saying that we need to get Wayne Gallman and other guys involved. Wayne Gallman gave them, I think, a decent yards per carry average, around 5, 6, or 7 yards. Saquon Barkley was averaging 10 yards a carry, and he had ripped off a 50-yard touchdown. Clearly, the difference between a 5-yard opportunity and 45, 50, or whatever Saquon could do is so great that it's hard to imagine even building in a few plays for Wayne Gallman or not getting the ball in Saquon Barkley's hand. So in the end, I just think it was bad coaching, untimely penalties, and situations and circumstances that led to Saquon not getting the ball. I don't think the Giants are tanking. I don't think that Pat Shurmur is the type of guy who would ever even buy into that kind of philosophy. He comes from the Andy Reid chain. He's out there to try to win games any way possible, not tank. However, the Giants have won a few games, and it'll be very interesting to see. I'm a Penn State alum, as most people know. I'm a huge Saquon Barkley fan. I thought the Giants made a really big mistake in the draft by taking Barkley and not going after Sam Darnold. They didn't have an opportunity to get Baker, but I thought they should have at least taken Darnold or Rosen. I'm not a scout in their department. I don't know how they feel, but I don't know what they didn't see in those quarterbacks that made them think that taking the franchise running back over the quarterback was a good decision. It doesn't look like there's going to be a big plethora of quarterbacks this year in the draft. Justin Herbert from Oregon is one, and there are a couple of guys, maybe Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State. I don't know if he's going to come out, but this doesn't look like it's going to be a very fertile first-round quarterback class. So the Giants going with Saquon Barkley and not finding a quarterback might wind up helping the Eagles as they go along, especially if they're just struggling to find someone at that quarterback position beyond 2018. Second question comes from Frank G. And I've actually heard this question a lot this year. I'm a little bit surprised. It's a good question, though. He asks me, am I sold on Carson Wentz as a franchise quarterback? And if I am, what does that mean for the rest of the team? Should the Eagles be in rebuild mode or tweak mode? I'm going to answer these questions separately, even though they're correlated. The first thing I'll say is this. I believe in Carson Wentz as a franchise quarterback. I think he is a very good quarterback with the potential to be elite. At this time last year, I thought he was already elite and that this wasn't even going to be a conversation. I think it's important to remember he's not even a year removed from the ACL surgery. That happened, I believe, on December 20th. I know the game was on December 15th of last year. So we're not even a year removed from A, the injury, or B, the surgery. He's clearly struggling in some areas, and I have to think that that's just all the time that he missed in the offseason because he was coming back from a surgery. So with all that said, I think despite some recent struggles, he's still shown you that he's a really darn good quarterback. Some things he's doing, though, are perplexing me, and I don't think it has anything to do with the injuries. I pointed it out on Monday when I did a film review for you guys on the Patreon site. And what I pointed out was his first sack early in the game came on 3rd and 15. 3rd and 15 is not a play where even the guttiest, most gunslinger quarterbacks are very likely to make a great play and pick up a first down. And on that specific play that they ran, they really only had 3 vertical receivers. And the Giants only rushed 4 and dropped 7. So you got 3 receivers trying to get open against 7 defensive backs or 7 covered personnel. That's just not going to happen. The Giants were clearly saying, attack us underneath. We're not giving you anything close to a first down. Carson Wentz had Zach Ertz open on the right side and Corey Clement open on the left side, both about 5 or 6 yards from the line of scrimmage. Either one of them would have been the perfect dump off, and you wind up punting, or maybe one of them makes a move and picks up more yards than they think. But the bottom line is you throw the ball to your check down, you punt, you live to see another day. What Carson did instead was pump the ball, look, run around a little bit, and then he eventually ended up taking a sack that was absolutely unnecessary. And most great quarterbacks know that in that situation, you either hope that one of your guys gets open downfield quickly and you go for it, or you just check down, punt, and live to see another day. The worst thing you can do there is take a sack, especially given Carson Wentz's history of fumbling and losing fumbles this year. It was a very bad decision. It was a decision that I was surprised that Carson has made, but as I've written on Patreon a lot this year, he is not seeing the checkdowns very well. He's either not seeing it or just ignoring it because he's trying so hard to make a play. I know we all love his aggression. I know we all love his Brett Favre nature of always trying to make a play. Sometimes, though, you got to make the smart play, and that's protecting the ball, get rid of the ball quickly. That's got to come along for him to continue to progress as a quarterback. That's really my only issue with Carson. It kind of goes back to last year, deciding to run or just throw the ball away. It's just that decision-making. If it continues to be a problem and it leads to regression, then the Eagles have an issue. Then Carson Wentz has an issue. I don't think it's going to be a problem long-term. He may always have one of those days where he makes a throw and you said that was a bad throw or a bad decision, but I don't think it's going to make him to regress to the point where instead of calling him Brett Favre, we're calling him Jake Plummer. I think he's too good for that. So I am convinced Carson is, excuse me, the long-term answer at quarterback for the Eagles. He will probably get a long-term contract, if not this offseason, then maybe the next one. It's going to be very lucrative. And that folds into the next question that Frank asked, which is, do you rebuild the roster or tweak the roster? Well, even if they just wanted to tweak the roster, they really can't, unfortunately, because the Eagles are already projected to be well over the salary cap next year. They are going to have to make sweeping changes in this offseason. They're going to need to get younger, and they're going to need to rely on their draft picks to replenish the roster. So it's going to wind up looking like a rebuild, but it won't be a total rebuild because you'll still have Carson, you'll still have Fletcher Cox, you'll still have Derek Barnett coming back, you'll still have Lane Johnson at right tackle, you still have Zach Ertz. You're going to have a lot of your nucleic players who were responsible for last year's Super Bowl and for this year, however they finish. But there will be a lot of guys, Jason Peters, potentially Rodney McLeod, Malcolm Jenkins, Brandon Graham may end up walking. I don't know if Chris Long is going to be back. We'll see what happens with Michael Bennett. We'll see if they're able to bring back Golden Tate. Kind of depends on whether they want to extend Nelson Aguilar or not. And at this point, they may have to choose one over the other. But there are going to be a ton of changes going forward. But like most teams, if you have that elite quarterback, you can survive. You expect year-round change. It'll be on Joe Douglas and Howie Roseman to make sure that they hit on their draft picks and they get good, young, cheap labor going forward. All right, last question from Dave, and he asks, what about Jordan Hicks? He asked about Jordan Hicks' contract situation. Should the Eagles hold on to him? I actually thought it was such a good question that I wrote about it today being actually last night, Thursday night. So if you go to Patreon, the last story that I've written right now is kind of an analysis of where the Eagles go and where Jordan Hicks go after this year. The facts are this, that Jordan Hicks is the best linebacker the Eagles have drafted since Jeremiah Trotter in 1998. But the facts are also, of the 16 linebackers they've drafted in between those guys, there really have been a lot of misses. A lot of Omar Gaithers and Quentin Cavers and Jamar Chaney's and Stuart Bradley's. The second best linebacker they've drafted since Jeremiah Trotter is probably Michael Kendricks, who's not even with the team. I think of the 16 linebackers they've drafted between Trot and between Jordan Hicks, of those 16, only 2 got extensions, and one was a 1-year extension. The other was Michael Kendricks, who got an extension, and pretty much 1 year into it, nobody liked it. So it just shows you how hard it's been for the Eagles to find really good linebackers in the draft. They found one in Jordan Hicks. The problem is his health. He's constantly hurt. He's going to miss Monday night's game against Washington. We know he missed half a year his first year. We know he missed half a year last year. So he's had a torn Achilles, a torn pec. He was hurt in college. He had a torn Achilles in college, and he was constantly hurt there at Texas too. So what the Eagles have to do after this year is make a decision. And what Jordan has to do is make a decision on what he's looking for. I don't think the Eagles can give him a contract worth $11 or $12 million a year. That's what guys like Luke Kuechly are getting. That's elite linebacker money. But at the same point, they just re-signed they re-signed Nigel Bradham last year at 30 years old to a contract of about $8 million a year, $7 or $8 million a year. It's structured interestingly, so you call it about $7 or $8 million annually. So Jordan has a right to ask for something between $8 and $10 million annually based on his level of play. His health history, though, may make the Eagles say, I'm not really ready to commit to you 5-6 year deal, and I'm giving you a lot of money up front and expecting that you're going to, be a 16 game a year player when you haven't shown that. I think in the end, what will happen is Jordan Hicks will sign a 1-year deal, a 1-year prove-it deal where he gets to stay healthy, get back to being a productive player. He has not been a very productive player this year compared to his first 2 or 3 years in the season. And then if he does that, kind of like what Jeremy Maclin did the year he came back from his ACL, had a great year under Chip Kelly, then made a lot of money with Kansas City Chiefs. I think Hicks will be in that similar situation. He'll probably re-sign for a year somewhere. I would imagine it'll be with the Eagles. Could be somewhere else. It'll be a 1-year deal. He'll get to prove it. But before everybody wants to kick Jordan Hicks out the door and say he's not the guy he was the first 2 years, just remember, you don't have Jordan Hicks. Your linebackers are basically Nigel Bradham, who hasn't had a very good year and is also over 30, Camus Grugier-Hill, who is a backup linebacker, special teams guy, and Nate Gary, who really hasn't shown himself to be much of a starting linebacker in the NFL. So you let Jordan Hicks walk, and now you've got to replenish your linebackers with not a lot of money in free agency and a long history of not finding good linebackers in the draft. If I were the Eagles, I would try to get him back on a 1-year deal, and Jordan Hicks would probably be amenable to it because I don't know that he's going to find a whole lot of money on the free agent market, especially if he gets hurt or misses even more time this year than he's already supposed to miss. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Mosher's Mailbag. I'm glad to bring it back. I appreciate all the people who have subscribed. We're getting close to 100, getting close to me making a donation to the Wounded Warrior Project, like I said I would do for every 100 subscribers. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell other Eagles fans. Holidays are coming up. Nice gift, a subscription to patreon.com/Jeff Mosher. And remember, get your questions in as soon as possible for next week's edition of Mosher's Mailbag. All right, have a great weekend, everybody.